Welcome back. Former President Trump's classified documents case back in a Florida court yesterday. Judge Aileen Cannon slamming a Department of Justice prosecutor who was pushing to modify Trump's release conditions. He wanted those conditions to include a gag order, preventing Trump from speaking publicly about the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, saying that his comments about use of force put agents at risk. In a separate motion, Trump's legal team called for the trial to be dismissed, accusing special counsel Jack Smith of receiving unlawful funding, arguing that Jack Smith is not authorized by statute and can access limitless funding to go after Trump. Cannon asking the prosecution if they really spent $9 million between November 2022 and March of 2023. The DOJ's lawyer was unsure and said that he would get the court an answer as to how much they spent on this. Joining me now is Florida Congressman Gimenez, a member of the House Armed Services, Homeland Security, and Select Committee on China. Congressman, what's your reaction? Are you a lawyer, Congressman?
No, I'm a firefighter. That's
okay.
That's how I started, a firefighter.
And I love that about you. Thank you for your service in the fire department. But what is your reaction to this? I just wanted to understand if you had the legal background to parse this, because this is pretty technical. But look at all of the things that they're asking of Judge Aileen Cannon and your reaction to how she's responding.
I think she's responded in a responsible way. I think she needs to be even-handed, and she's shown to be even-handed. And so as far as trying to gag the President of the United States again, that's exactly what they did in New York. But I don't think it's going to work here in Florida, and I think this judge is going to be a much fairer judge than what President Trump got in New York.
And what about this idea that Jack Smith is not actually authorized to even take this on? They want the whole case dismissed. And we spoke with Andy McCarthy about that. And here's what he said. Watch this.
I think it's a very substantial argument, Jillian, because the appointments clause provide that you have to have one of two things. Either you have to have a position that's created by law where Congress has prescribed a way for the person to qualify. You have to have nomination by the president and confirmation by the Senate. And the problem with Smith is he was not appointed by a statute. He hasn't been nominated. He wasn't confirmed. He's basically appointed by a Justice Department regulation, and the Attorney General under the Constitution does not have the power to create an office position like this.
Your reaction?
My reaction, I mean, it sounds, I'm not an attorney, like I said, I'm a firefighter, but if what he said is true, then I think that the Trump team has a pretty good argument to throw out Jack Smith. But again, that's going to be up to the judge to decide.
Congressman, let me move on and get your take on the border, which, of course, as you have noted in the past, has created a situation where every state is a border state. One of the migrants from Venezuela who is accused of murdering this dear, beautiful, precious 12-year-old, Jocelyn Nungary, will be in a Texas court this morning. The other accused murderer was in court yesterday, and the judge set his bond at $10 million. They determined that he was, in fact, a flight risk. The death penalty is not off the table also. Both migrants are facing capital murder charges. Of course, they entered the country on Joe Biden's watch in his open border. Court documents allege the migrants lured Nungary under a bridge, where then they stripped her naked to the waist, and they assaulted her for 2 hours. One of the suspects was even wearing an Immigration and Customs Enforcement ankle monitor when the crime happened. An Equus poll finding Latino voters in battleground states favor Trump's immigration policies over Biden's. 43% trust Trump on immigration, while 38% trust Biden. Congressman, your reaction to this horrific story?
Yeah, it's just this is a product of Joe Biden's reckless, irresponsible policy at the southern border, allowing everybody to come in. Look, he's flouting the law. He is violating the law. The law says the only people who are allowed in at the border are those that seek asylum and the ones that have valid asylum claims. Parole is to be given on a case-by-case basis. He has given parole on a mass basis, and when you do that, these are the results. And it's unfortunate that Americans are paying the price now for Joe Biden's policy. And as I've said from the get-go, it's on purpose. This has been done on purpose by Joe Biden. For what reason? Again, it seems to be more political than anything else. And he's trying to change the face of America. And what he's doing is illegal, and now it's costing American lives. And by the way, be careful. Remember what the FBI director said, that we are at the point where he really fears some mass terrorist attacks because the people that are coming through the border are not being vetted correctly. And again, we also have 2 million that we don't even know who they are, why they're here, where they are, and the reason why they crossed the border, which poses an unbelievable threat to the United States of America.
Of course, and one would expect that, and you know more than most. You're on the House Homeland Security Committee, but Congressman, do you think this comes up in the debate? I mean, look, I don't know how much CNN knows about the border. Frankly, I never see them cover the wide open border. I don't see them talking about the fact that we've had murders at the hands of illegal migrants. So I just wonder, if they're not covering it on a day-to-day basis like we are at Fox, do you think they're even going to raise it, even though it's one of the most important issues for voters? Are they going to raise it on Thursday?
Look, I have serious doubts about what CNN is going to do in that debate. CNN has been a huge critic of President Trump, has been completely unfair to the president. Look, the first thing I would do if I were President Trump is I'd turn over to President Biden and say, are you going to apologize to the American people for not only lying to them, but actually fabricating a lie about your son's laptop? Are you going to do that? And find out if the president will do that. Look, the president of the United States, Joe Biden, lied to the American people, fabricated the story on a debate stage, saying that it was Russian misinformation when he knew all along that it wasn't Russian misinformation. He lied to the American people. But hey, that's par for the course. President Biden has been lying to the American people for the last 3.5 years. And so, no, I don't expect a fair treatment of President Trump. I actually congratulate President Trump for going on the debate stage, knowing that the deck is stacked against him. But it's going to be difficult for President Trump because he's not going to get a fair shake out of CNN.
All right. Well, we'll be watching that, of course. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
All right. Carlos Gimenez this morning.